Former Prime Minister Sir John Major has called scenes featuring him in the new series of The Crown a barrel load of nonsense.
Well, the show obviously is facing a lot of fresh criticism over this new storyline where the now King, Charles, tries plotting to get his mother, the Queen, to abdicate. And joining us now is Newsweek's royal correspondent, Jack Royston, who just doesn't think there's a problem with this, and David Mellor, who served, of course, in John Major's cabinet, and he agrees with the former PM. So we'll start with you, Mr Mellor. Thank you for joining us. Look, it might be inaccurate, it might be fiction going a little bit too far, but do you think it's actually dangerous and damaging for the monarchy?
Yeah, I think it is, because I think people will believe it. And don't forget, Prince Charles has had a pretty rough ride through his life. I'm not saying that some of that isn't of his own making, but he's been a controversial character. He's done very well since he's become king. And I think it's a shame if he is tarnished by this. I mean, you could argue the truth is bad enough without the fiction. And I am totally convinced that this is fiction, because at that point, I was in John Major's cabinet. I was extremely close to him personally. And I'm quite sure I'd have got a hint of this if it had happened. And also, John is a man of great rectitude, and he would not have been a party to what he would have regarded, actually, as a treasonous discussion. And by the way, I don't speak as an anti-Crown person. I've seen every episode so far, and I dare say I shall see the rest of them. But there comes a moment when a television series becomes so influential that people, particularly people overseas, particularly people in America, will actually believe every word of it. And if people believe every word of what we are led to believe Peter Morgan has put in this new series, well, I'm afraid it's not going to look good for Charles.
OK, Jack Royston, you co-host Newsweek's The Royals podcast. In this particular episode, the writers in The Crown suggest Charles believed his mother, who was then 65, was repeating Queen Victoria's mistakes by refusing to stand aside for a younger heir. David Mellor says he believes John Major when he says this is absolute nonsense. But most people aren't in David Mellor's position, where they know the Prime Minister at the time and they know they would have known about it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's nonsense, you know, it's fiction. It's fiction. But what the Crown are trying to do is establish two things in the mind of the viewer. One, Charles was incredibly popular before his affair became public knowledge, and that is true. Separate polling that we've looked at from the era at Newsweek shows that 82% of the British public thought he would make a good king. In December 1991, by the time he divorced Diana, that crashed to 41%. And actually, it was at a similar level in the 30s before the Queen passed away. So what the Crown are trying to do is to lodge in people's minds Charles was hugely popular. Then the affair came out. That's the story of the series. Then he had a massive crash, and that has implications for succession.
OK, so let's set aside whether things were true or not, because we've established that he never went to the Queen, or never went to John Major and wanted him to force the Queen to abdicate. All right, so that's not true. But a lot of the things you've referenced are true.
Yeah.
And a lot of them will be embarrassing, frankly, for the King and Queen.
And this is the issue, because Charles had a massive bounce after the Queen passed away and the nation was in mourning, and the public performed a U-turn, and 30 points went to Charles, and now everybody's much more positive about him. And I think the anxiety will be that this season will drag him back down again. But it is not the fiction that's going to drag him down. It's the stuff about the disintegration of his marriage to Diana, and a lot of that is true.
We can just come back to Mr Mellor. Let's set aside accuracy here and fiction and talk about tone. It's said that the new series is going to explore the long-held rumours that Prince Philip had an affair behind the Queen's back. And given that the Queen has only just passed on, there's a lot of comment to say that that's inappropriate at the moment and those scenes shouldn't be shown. What do you think about that in terms of tone?
I think the problem is that this is such a successful series, and, you know, the quality of the production values are so high. It's easy for people to think sometimes they're watching a documentary. Now, I don't think that Peter Morgan, who's a very good writer, needs to resort to obvious, trashy fiction in this. He could write a perfectly credible and thoroughly absorbing piece when he deals with the facts. I don't think the Prince of Wales, the king as he now is, has any right to have all the things that he did airbrushed out of history. I knew the Princess of Wales very well. I was very fond of her, actually. And she obviously had a rough old time, and that is history. But what is not history, or we can agree with Henry Ford that history is bunk, it's bunk that, you know, he, at that time, of all times, would be trying to persuade the Prime Minister to get rid of Mum and put him on the throne. And apart from anything else, you know, if you think about it, but the trouble is most people won't think about it, particularly our American friends, they're not going to think about it. But the reality is that if the breakup of his marriage with Princess Diana was not an overnight thing. So all this time he's supposed to be plotting to become king immediately. He knows full well that all kinds of awful things are going to come out. So he would be crazy to be doing this. And I don't think the Crown does its credibility any good by putting in storylines that, you know, you haven't got to know much British history to know are bunk.
David Mellor, you said you've watched every episode so far. Will you be boycotting the next series now that you know it's full of rubbish?
Why would I do that? All I'm being asked to say, you know, this is not Russia. I haven't got Mr. Putin lurking in the background telling me what we can or cannot say, and you're not going to be hauled off the air for being subversive. No, of course I'll watch it. I think it's a thoroughly absorbing series, but you kindly asked me, or one of your producers did, what did I think of that storyline? And I said, rubbish. What do I think it will do? I think it'll be damaging. Look, he gets it all from Shakespeare. You know, Shakespeare was the first writer to actually rubbish historical figures. You know, and if I was standing here defending Richard III, who apparently, according to quite a lot of historians, was quite a good bloke, I wouldn't be able to get over what Shakespeare said about him centuries ago.
Absolutely.
You know, these things stick.
That's a very good analogy, Mr. Mellor. Thank you for that. Very quickly, how far in terms of time will The Crown go? Will it come up right up to date with Harry and Meghan, do you think, in the future series?
It's not going to come right up to date with Harry and Meghan. It might go past the point of Diana passing away and deal with the aftermath. It might go into the very early noughties, but I don't think we're going to get
Why
a
not?
series.
It would be gold.
Well, because Netflix is doing a series with Harry and Meghan.
I've already got that sewn up. Yeah,
Exactly.
no, Peter Morgan has what he calls the 20-year rule, which doesn't go back further than 20 years.
Good to talk to you both.